In the mountains of Lisdor lies the citadel of the dragon, a temple fortress of unimaginable beauty and power. It is the home of the renowned Order of the Dragon. 1,000 years ago, the Order of the Dragon was formed, uniting all paladins and clerics of Lisdor to fight and defeat the Dark Lord. For centuries, paladins and clerics would take sabbatical to the citadel to train in combat and learn the secret invocations and prayers calling upon the power of the sun god before returning to their respective orders. The Order of the Dragon is a common bond among all paladins and clerics and unites all religious orders of Lisdor. This is the story of an orphaned street urchin and a wealthy halfling. Lord Batten, Lord of the Paladin Knights of the Dragon, had chosen, much to the dismay of the citadel, an orphan street urchin as his squire. Squires of the citadel were usually chosen from their minor noble houses, among the children of those who would never rise above their station in life, and was the pride of all the minor noble houses to claim their son was a chosen squire of the citadel and the famed paladins. Every year during the summer solstice, a celebrated contest was held at the citadel of the dragon, called the Trident. Lords and ladies, noble houses, commoners, villagers, farmers from far and wide and throughout Lisdor would ascend the steeps to the citadel for the week-long festivities. The highlight was a 4-day contest where all the knights of the realm would compete in the Trident, in hopes to win and be accepted as one of the renowned Paladin Knights of the Dragon. Last year, like many years before, thousands arrived and enjoyed food, music, and entertainment of the solstice the day before the Trident competition. That year, an unknown knight entered the competition. He was not from any of the noble houses and castles. He did not carry a banner of any liege lord or field. His armor was cobbled together from older pieces and seemed odd-fitting. His only markings was a painting of a wild dog in red on his shield. He paid his golden tribute to the Trident, and while laughed at behind his back, surely to fail, was accepted into the Trident competition. He was not expected to last the first day, but he defeated every knight in the opening jousting ceremony. Soon this underdog, with shoddy armor and being cheered by the commoners. For the first time, the commoners, villagers, farmers felt they had their own champion in the games, for he did not represent any of the noble houses. He won each of the following days, and on the last day was one of the 5 remaining knights to compete in the Circle of the Dragon, a final competition. A statue of a dragon stood in the center of the field. Each claw of the dragon held a weapon, as did the tail. 5 weapons in total: a spear, longsword, mace, flail, and the tail curled around a trident. The 5 knights stood at the 5 corners of the field, surrounding the dragon, only armed with their shields and armor, waiting for the Lord of the Paladins to give the order for the game to begin. Once the game began, they would rush towards the dragon statue and retrieve a weapon and begin to battle their fellow knights. It was the highlight of the event, and the battle would continue until one knight stood. It was common for knights to become severely maimed, arms and legs broken, bone-crushing blows, and eye lost, and every few years a knight would fall, not to rise again. While the competing knights were ordered to win, they were forbidden to purposely kill one another, but in the heat of battle, their blood pumping and serious injury or even death would occur occasionally. It was clear on this day the other 4 knights had united to defeat the unknown knight who had embarrassed each of them the previous day in the festivities. He was not of a noble house and had made fools of them. They also helped to win favor of the commoners who adopted this unknown knight as their champion, giving them hope. The unknown knight, knowing he was outmatched, needed to even the odds, and when the Lord Paladin gave the order to begin, The unknown knight did not charge the statues as the other knights. Instead, he slung his shield like a disc to the knight to his left and caught the knight in the legs mid-stride, sending him down hard, falling on his own shield and knocking him out. Immediately after slinging his shield, he charged at full speed towards the knight at his right and drove his shoulder into the knees of the knight before reaching the dragon statue. A snapping cracking of a tree branch echoed over the crowd, but it was not a tree branch, but the femur bone of the knight he charged, cracking in half. The bone protruded through the skin, and the knight howled in agony as blood flowed from his armor. The crowd cheered. The other two knights on the other far side of the dragon statue had retrieved from the front two claws of the dragon the long sword and spear, and quickly saw the other two fallen knights. One was completely knocked out, laying on his shield, as the other was grabbing his leg where the bone was protruding, spewing blood. They looked at each other and then looked around. The unknown knight was nowhere to be found. The crowd began to cheer very loudly, causing confusion among the remaining two knights. Then, from the sky, the unknown knight fell upon one of the knights. The knight crumbled under the weight of the unknown knight and was completely knocked out. Standing before the last knight was the unknown knight, now holding the trident. It had dawned on the remaining knight that the unknown knight had grabbed the trident, climbed the statue of the dragon, and jumped from its head down upon them. This realization and shock took but a second too long. The trident was moving in full force and forked the knight's arm, holding a longsword. A quick twist and snap. The knight's wrist was broken and the sword fell to the ground. The unknown knight crouched and spun, using the trident hooked to the knight's arm like a catapult, and slung the knight over his head, landing him on his back, unconscious. It was the fastest contest of the trident in its history, and the only one in which one knight had defeated them all. The crowd cheered, a roar so loud it was deafening. The paladins and clerics looked upon in shock, for this unknown knight had in minutes defeated four of the most heralded knights in the land. A few of the paladins and clerics looked upon the unknown knight in disgust, as his tactics seemed unfair, but there was nothing in the rules about tactics. The unknown knight walked over and picked up his shield and stepped forward before the Lord of the Paladins, the Order of the Dragon. He fell to one knee and bowed deeply, not rising. The head priest of the order stepped forward, raised his hand for the audience to quiet, and turned to the unknown knight. "Show yourself! Remove this helmet!" in a tone of disgust. A quietness fell over the crowd, and all eyes were trained on the unknown knight. He rose to his feet slowly and removed his helmet. It was the orphan squire of the Lord Paladin. The head priest's face grew anger. "He cannot be a paladin! He's made a mockery of the trident!" The crowd began to boo and yell at the priest. The Lord Paladin stood. He paid his tribute and signed the decree of the trident. It was countersigned by the Order of the Dragon. He won every combat and now stands victoriously before all witnesses. There is nowhere it is said that a commoner cannot be a paladin or a cleric of the order. The priest turned in a huff and left the parade grounds. The Lord Paladin turned and smiled at his orphan squire, and he nodded with respect, the signal of a job well done. The unknown knight raised his shield and helmet to a victorious applause of the crowd. The orphan became known as the Dog Knight and was inducted into the Paladin Order. The story spread across the land and a legend was born. In time, the priest accepted the Dog Knight begrudgingly, as various temples and the citadel saw a huge increase in commoner support and tributes paid. The priest realized that giving commoners hope and having a champion of their own also gave the order a newfound support and riches. The Dog Knight, while accepted into the order, was not accepted among his peers. He found no solace or friendship save one, a halfling cleric. The halfling cleric was the only halfling who had served in the Order of the Dragon. The halfling had come from an extremely wealthy family, his father the largest trader of grain and food in Lisdor, and supplied the citadel and all the clerical and paladin orders in the land. Once a year, his father would send free wine and food and 100 servants to the citadel to the solstice and the trident festival. The halfling was not content to live the life of luxury, and as a child would often sneak out of the family manor. The halfling became friends with a street urchin named Rake, and Rake would show the halfling how the other half of the world lived, and together they would rob wealthy travelers and buy food for the poor. While exciting, it also gave the halfling spiritual reward, providing help and food for those far less fortunate than himself. On a few occasions, the halfling would steal from his father's warehouses wine and bread, and would hold a private feast for Rake and his friends. His father grew tired of the son's mischief, and his son pleaded with his father that he was doing this only to help others. His father agreed his son's motives were pure, but his methods were unsavory. His father had a strong bond with the head priest of the Dragon Citadel, and he was the trader that supplied the food, wine, and bread to the citadel. A halfling had never become a member of the order, but his father would try. The halfling's father made a pact with the priest, promising to provide the food and wine and bread to the Order of the Dragon for a significant discount if they would accept his son into the order. This was a highly unusual request, and while true that many of the minor noble houses would purchase their son's acceptance to the order to become a squire, never a cleric or paladin was purchased. The priest agreed under one condition: the halfling son would have to earn his way by joining and serving in Yandella's children's order. It was a halfling order, which had a small temple in Lisdor that had fallen in disarray over the years. The halflings had left Lisdor during the Great War against the Dark Lord, returning to their homeland. Only a few halflings remained, and the once great temple of Yandella's children's in Lisdor became a shadow of its former self. The father agreed, and his son was soon sent to the decrepit temple. His son, ever the optimist, saw his new home as an opportunity. The temple of Yandella, once serving over 100 clerics, had now only 8. Most of the temple laid empty, and the cleric order would attempt to provide medical and food aid, but with only 8 clerics and almost no tributes. For few halflings lived in Lisdor, they had barely enough for themselves, and relied on the quarterly distribution from the citadel to keep the small temple from growing abandoned in the winter months. The halfling requested his father to supply Yandella's children's temple with the unsold food and wine that would spoil, so that they could provide it for others, and the father agreed. The halfling remained friends with Rake, and soon invited Rake to help distribute food and invite those he knew that lived in squalor to visit the temple for food and wine. The halfling began a new tradition, the quarterly feast at Yandella's temple. The quarterly feast was to serve for those who would come to help rebuild the temple. Rake was able to gather over a dozen of people living in squalor to come to the temple. They spent the entire time helping the clerks clean and rebuild the fallen temple, and in the evening they all enjoyed a huge feast of food supplied by the halfling's father. Soon Yolanda's feast grew, and over 100 would arrive and work laboriously rebuilding the temple, and in the evening enjoying a huge feast. A few even joined the temples as supporters, not official clerics, but took up home there and helped the order. Yolanda's temples grew in support, and soon word spread of its success, even to the citadel of the dragon. Over the years, the halfling proved far more than expected. It was called upon by the head priest of the citadel of the dragon. When the halfling arrived, his father was there, along with the other clerics of his order. The head priest, along with the lord of the paladins, and the fellow dragon priest stood in mass in the great temple. It was the ceremony of the dragon clerics, only bestowed upon the most deserving clerics. They would take residence for a year at the citadel for sabbatical to learn combat and the invocations and prayers of the sun dragon. It was a very special and surprise affair, for no halfling in a 1,000-year history of the dragon order was ever accepted. The father, who had initially feared that his son's mischief would end in his ruin, turned out that his son's greatest gift was that of giving. The halfling was admitted to the Order of the Dragon, a dream that few ever realized and too far remote for a halfling to ever realize. He would work hard and master his skills, and would make his father, the priest, his fellow clerics of Yandala's temple proud. Much like the Dog Knight, the halfling stood out at the citadel. Well accepted, he had trouble making friends for being different, and instead poured his time and efforts into his training and studies. The Dog Knight and halfling became fast friends. They shared stories of their youth in the streets of Lisdor and the mischief that they would get into. Soon they became inseparable, and together they became known as the Dogling. It was a morning like any other when an unexpected knock came at the door. It was the priest Abner, an elderly priest who was the instructor of prayer for the Dog Knight and halfling. "Come, your presence is requested in the temple." The Dog Knight followed the priest to the grand temple. It was empty, save for the high priest of the dragon, who stood at the end of the nave arcade in the high pulpit and reading over one of the ancient texts. The Dog Knight kneeled and bowed his head, waiting for acknowledgement from the high priest to rise, but none came. Instead, the priest addressed him without ceremony. "Dog Knight, I have accepted you into the Dragon Citadel despite my misgivings. Your presence has poisoned some of the fellow knights and has brought them shame. Allowing a commoner, let alone a street orphan, into our hallowed halls? Yet, I would be remiss if I did not recognize your value, giving hope to the commoners and their increased support to the Citadel. Your Lord Batten has been gone now and no longer here to defend you. It is now time that you serve the Dragon Citadel. Lord Batten has not returned from his quest and has been gone from some time. Word has traveled of a skirmish involving a Paladin Knight of the Dragon Order outside the village of Wormwood. I believe this to be your Lord Batten's doing. You are to leave immediately and find Lord Batten and return with him or his remains. That is all." The Dog Knight rises, turns and leaves. He returns to his room and finds his friend the halfling waiting. Before he's able to share news, the door opens, and it's the priest Abner. "Lord Batten was sent on a quest by the high priest in search of the Sun Sword. This is of great secrecy and concern, for if the Sun Sword exists, it would bring the high priest great power. It was a sword used to defeat the Dark Lord and believed stolen by the Order of the Silver Dragon, a fabled order who had once pledged fealty to the Dragon Citadel. It has not been seen for 1,000 years. I had received word that Lord Batten was staying at the Bear Bow Inn in Wormwood, and may have discovered a secret as to the location of the Silver Dragon's temple. Now go, and do not share what I have told you with anyone. I fear dark forces are rising in the east, and if the Sun Sword exists, it will be a prize the dark forces will not wish to be discovered." With that, Priest Abner exits the room swiftly. The halfling urges the Dog Knight to join him on his quest, and while the Dog Knight is reluctant, he knows the halfling will never agree to stay behind, so it is settled. They will leave together in the morning. That night, both the halfling and the Dog Knight have a dark dream of an elderly woman. She gives a glimpse of a silver dragon in their dream. In the morning, they both awake with a card on their chest, the Diviner. In the morning, they share the card and tell each other about their identical dreams. They pack their bags and their horses and leave for Wormwood. It is an uneventful 4 days' ride to the village of Wormwood in the east. Approaching the village, they see a small inn nestled in the woods alongside the road, with a sign swinging that reads, "The Bear and Bow Inn." Welcome to the Legends of Barovia, and your quest begins.